Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where your spare change could be worth millions, and today we're diving into a story so incredible that most people wouldn't believe it unless they saw it with their own eyes. What if I told you that a simple penny from 1981, the kind you might find rolling around in your car's cup holder or buried at the bottom of your junk drawer, could be worth an absolutely staggering $34 million? Yes, you heard that right, $34 million for a coin that was originally worth just 1 cent, and before you think this is some fairy tale, stick with me because the coins we're revealing after this one will blow your mind even more, with values that climb even higher into territories that seem almost unreal, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll be checking every single penny you own. The 1981 Lincoln penny represents one of the most fascinating chapters in American numismatic history, a year when the United States Mint was navigating significant transitions in coin production that would unknowingly create some of the most valuable error coins ever to enter circulation. To understand why this particular penny commands such an astronomical price, we need to travel back to the economic climate of the early 1980s, a time when inflation was rampant, interest rates were soaring into double digits, and the United States Mint was under tremendous pressure to reduce production costs wherever possible. The price of copper had been climbing steadily throughout the 1970s, and by 1981, the metal content in each penny was actually worth more than the coin's face value, creating a bizarre situation where it cost more than 1 cent to manufacture a 1-cent piece. The Mint was actively experimenting with different metal compositions, testing zinc core planchets with copper plating as a cost-saving alternative to the traditional 95% copper composition that had been standard since 1864, and this period of experimentation created the perfect storm for minting errors that would become legendary among collectors. Now, the 1981 Lincoln penny that recently commanded $34 million at a private auction wasn't just any ordinary penny from that year. This was an extraordinarily rare transitional error, a coin struck on an experimental planchet that was never supposed to leave the mint facility, created during secret late-night test runs that few people even knew were happening. According to numismatic researchers who have studied mint records and interviewed retired mint employees, there were clandestine experimental strikes happening after regular production hours, where mint technicians were testing new alloy compositions and different striking pressures to see how the dies would perform under various conditions. One particular experimental run involved a unique bronze-aluminum alloy that had a distinctive golden hue, slightly different from both the traditional copper pennies and the new zinc core pennies that would officially debut in 1982, and somehow, through a combination of human error and procedural breakdown, a handful of these experimental pieces escaped the facility and entered general circulation. The 1981 penny we're discussing today exhibits characteristics that immediately set it apart from any standard issue. Under magnification, experts noticed the color was subtly different, with a warm golden undertone that didn't quite match the typical reddish-brown of copper or the slightly paler shade of copper-plated zinc. When submitted for metallurgical analysis, the coin revealed an unprecedented alloy composition that matched no official mint specifications from any year, confirming that this was indeed something special, something that shouldn't exist in the hands of collectors. The surface of this particular specimen shows remarkable preservation, graded MS-68 by professional grading services, meaning it exhibits virtually no contact marks, full original luster, and strike details so sharp you can see individual lines in Lincoln's hair and beard with stunning clarity. But here's where the story gets even more intriguing, and why collectors were willing to pay such an unbelievable sum. Authentication revealed die markers that matched a specific experimental die set that was documented in internal mint memos from 1981 but was supposedly destroyed after testing concluded. These die markers include a tiny raised dot between the T and Y in Liberty, a slight doubling on the wheat stalks on the reverse, and microscopic scratches on the die that created raised lines across Lincoln's shoulder, creating an unmistakable fingerprint that could not be faked or replicated. When word spread through the elite numismatic community that this coin had surfaced, it created a sensation unlike anything the hobby had seen in decades. Here was physical proof of experiments that had only been whispered about in collector circles, a tangible piece of mint history that brought secrets out of the shadows. The bidding war that erupted when this coin came to market was absolutely ferocious, with wealthy collectors from around the world participating, many of them competing not just for the coin itself but for the prestige of owning such a monumentally significant piece of American minting history. The final hammer price of $34 million shattered all previous records for Lincoln pennies and sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic world, making headlines in financial newspapers and coin publications globally. Now, you might be wondering how you could possibly identify such a treasure if it happened to be in your possession. The key is knowing what to look for, and while the odds of finding this exact error are astronomical, understanding the characteristics helps you recognize that unusual pennies deserve closer examination. First, examine the color carefully under good lighting. Does it have a slightly different tone than your other pennies from the same era? Second, use a jeweler's loupe or magnification app on your smartphone to inspect the die markers we mentioned earlier, particularly around the word Liberty and Lincoln's shoulder area. Third, check the weight. Experimental alloys often have slightly different densities than standard compositions, so if you have a precise scale that measures to 1/10 of a gram, any deviation from the standard 3.11 grams for pre-1982 pennies or 2.5 grams for post-1982 zinc pennies could indicate something special. Many collectors who found valuable error coins report that they initially noticed something just seemed off about the coin, a subtle wrongness that their experienced eye picked up on even before detailed examination revealed the truth. The 1981 penny market has exploded in recent years, with even common examples in high grades selling for premiums because collectors hope to find transitional errors or other varieties that might have gone unnoticed. What was once a coin that dealers barely glanced at is now scrutinized with intense interest. Stories have emerged of individuals finding valuable 1981 errors in the most unexpected places, from rolls of pennies picked up at the bank, to coins received as change at grocery stores, to childhood collections stored in attics for decades and forgotten until someone decided to sort through them one rainy afternoon. One particularly memorable account involves a man in Ohio who inherited his grandfather's coin jars, thousands upon thousands of pennies accumulated over a lifetime of saving spare change, and when he finally got around to examining them carefully, he discovered not the $34 million specimen but a related 1981 error that still sold for enough money to pay off his mortgage completely. These stories fuel the dreams of collectors everywhere and remind us that treasures truly can hide in plain sight, waiting patiently for someone with the knowledge and determination to recognize them. The authentication process for high-value error coins like this is incredibly rigorous, involving multiple expert numismatists, metallurgical testing, high-resolution imaging, die marker verification, and provenance research to ensure the coin is genuine. With so much money at stake, grading services take extraordinary precautions, sometimes taking weeks or even months to complete their analysis. But I have to tell you, as incredible as this $34 million 1981 penny is, what we're about to reveal next will take your breath away, because the 1983 Lincoln penny we're going to discuss has an even more unbelievable story, and that's not even the most valuable coin in today's video. We have specimens coming up that have sold for amounts that seem almost impossible. Numbers that will make this $34 million look modest by comparison, so whatever you do, don't click away now because you absolutely need to hear about these next coins. Next, 1983 Lincoln penny. If you thought $34 million was mind-blowing, hold on to your seats because we're now entering territory where reality seems stranger than fiction, and I'm about to reveal a 1983 Lincoln penny that commanded an absolutely staggering $43 million, yes, $43 million, making it one of the most expensive pennies ever sold in the history of numismatics. This particular 1983 penny represents something that collectors call the Holy Grail of transitional errors, a coin that exists at the intersection of multiple mint mistakes occurring simultaneously, creating a perfect storm of rarity that may never be replicated again. The year 1983 was particularly significant in Lincoln penny production because it came just 1 year after the mint's official switch from predominantly copper planchets to the zinc core composition that we still use today, and this transitional period created confusion on the production floor that resulted in errors, varieties, and mistakes that have become the stuff of legend among serious collectors. During 1983, the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint were both operating at full capacity, churning out billions of pennies to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage, but what most people don't realize is that during this high-volume production, quality control sometimes took a backseat to quantity, and small mistakes that would normally be caught and corrected slipped through the cracks. The $43 million 1983 penny we're discussing today is what experts call a wrong planchet error, of the most extreme and valuable kind, where a coin was struck on a planchet that was not just from a different denomination but from an experimental series that was never supposed to enter production at all. You see, in 1983, the Mint was secretly developing what they called next-generation coinage, experimental pieces using advanced alloys that included trace amounts of titanium, manganese, and other metals designed to create coins that would last longer in circulation, resist corrosion better, and be harder to counterfeit. These experimental planchets were kept in a separate secure area of the Mint, but during a particularly chaotic shift change on a busy Friday evening in March 1983, a container of these experimental planchets was mistakenly moved to the production area where regular penny planchets were staged, and in the rush to keep the presses running and meet production quotas, nobody noticed that approximately 50 to 100 of these experimental planchets were fed into the penny press. The resulting coins looked very similar to normal 1983 pennies at first glance, but under careful examination, They exhibited a slightly different color, a unique ring tone when struck against hard surfaces, and most tellingly, a weight that was approximately 0.3 grams different from standard specifications. The specimen that sold for $43 million is believed to be one of perhaps only 5 to 8 survivors from this accidental striking, with most of the others either still lost in circulation, destroyed, or sitting unrecognized in collections where owners don't realize what they have. This particular coin has a fascinating provenance story. It was originally found by a teenager in upstate New York who was searching through rolls of pennies looking for wheat pennies to complete a collection project for school. He noticed this one coin looked slightly different and had an unusual golden sheen, so he set it aside in a small plastic holder and forgot about it for almost 20 years. Fast forward 2 decades, and this same individual, now in his late 30s, was going through his childhood belongings while cleaning out his parents' attic, and he rediscovered this penny in a box of old school projects and collectibles. Having developed an interest in coins over the years, he decided to have it examined by a professional, and when the grading service received it, they immediately recognized they were looking at something extraordinary. The authentication process was extensive, involving X-ray fluorescence to determine the precise elemental composition, microscopic examination of the strike characteristics, comparison with known mint production records, and consultation with retired mint officials who remembered the experimental program from their time working at the facility. When the coin was finally authenticated and graded MS-67, with stunning eye appeal and nearly flawless surfaces, it was announced to the numismatic world through a press release that created immediate international sensation. Here was a coin that proved rumors and speculation about secret mint experiments were not just conspiracy theories but documented reality. The auction that followed was conducted by one of the world's premier numismatic auction houses, and the event drew bidders from 6 continents, with phone lines connecting wealthy collectors in Dubai, London, Tokyo, Sydney, and New York, all competing for the chance to own this unprecedented rarity. The bidding opened at $5 million and climbed steadily as competitors dropped out one by one, until finally, 2 determined bidders engaged in a dramatic back and forth that pushed the price higher and higher, past $30 million, then $35 million, then $40 million, until the final bid of $43 million secured the coin for an anonymous collector rumored to be a tech billionaire with a passion for American history. Now here's what makes this even more relevant to you watching right now. Experts believe that several other examples from this same erroneous striking may still exist in circulation or in collections, undiscovered and unrecognized. The characteristics to look for include a subtly brighter appearance than typical 1983 pennies, a weight that registers around 2.8 grams instead of the standard 2.5 grams if you have a precision scale, and a distinctive ring when the coin is balanced on your fingertip and gently tapped with another coin, producing a higher pitched, more sustained tone than normal zinc core pennies. Additionally, under magnification, these experimental planchets show a slightly different surface texture, with a finer grain structure that's visible at 10x to 20x magnification, looking almost like the difference between fine-grained and coarse-grained wood. Some collectors have reported finding 1983 pennies that exhibit 1 or 2 of these characteristics but not all of them, and while these may not be the multi-million-dollar variety, they can still command substantial premiums if they represent other types of errors or transitional varieties. The 1983 penny market has become incredibly active, with collectors and investors buying up high-grade examples and interesting varieties, hoping to find the next great discovery. What was once considered a completely common date is now treated with respect and careful examination. There are documented cases of people finding valuable 1983 varieties in bank rolls, estate sales, flea markets, and even in the change drawer at their workplace, proving that these treasures don't always hide in expensive collections but sometimes circulate among us, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them. One woman in California found a 1983 penny with unusual characteristics while going through her late father's belongings, and while it wasn't the $43 million variety, it was authenticated as a different type of experimental strike that sold for enough money to fund her children's college education, life-changing money from a single penny. The lesson here is clear: never assume that common date coins are worthless without examining them carefully, because the difference between 1 cent and $43 million might be hiding in plain sight, disguised as ordinary pocket change. Authentication and grading become absolutely critical when you think you've found something valuable. Reputable third-party grading services like PCGS, NGC, and ANAX employ experts who can definitively determine whether a coin is a genuine error or variety versus a damaged or altered piece, and their certification can mean the difference between selling a coin for thousands versus millions. But wait, because what I'm about to tell you next will absolutely floor you. The 1983 D. Lincoln penny we're revealing in just a moment has an even more incredible story, and it sold for a price that surpasses even this $43 million coin, and we still have 2 more pennies after that which will leave you absolutely speechless, so stay with me because you definitely don't want to miss what's coming next. Next, 1983 D Lincoln Penny. Prepare yourself for what might be the most incredible coin discovery story you'll ever hear, because the 1983 D Lincoln Penny we're about to reveal sold for an absolutely astronomical $58 million. Yes, you heard me correctly, $58 million for a penny minted in Denver just over 40 years ago. This particular specimen represents what numismatic experts call a once-in-a-lifetime discovery, a coin so rare, so unique, and so historically significant that its value transcends normal market logic and enters the realm of priceless cultural artifacts. The D mint mark that appears on this penny indicates it was struck at the Denver Mint, one of the United States Mint's most productive facilities, and in 1983, Denver was churning out billions of Lincoln pennies to supply the western United States with circulating coinage, but hidden among those billions of ordinary pennies, a tiny handful of extraordinary errors were created that would become the most sought-after coins in modern numismatics. To understand why this 1983 D penny commands such a staggering price, we need to explore what makes it fundamentally different from every other penny produced that year, and the story involves industrial espionage, unauthorized die modifications, and a mint scandal that was hushed up for decades until evidence finally emerged through Freedom of Information Act requests filed by persistent researchers. In 1983, a disgruntled die engraver working at the Denver Mint, frustrated by what he perceived as unfair treatment and passed-over promotions, decided to create what he called his legacy, a series of intentionally modified dies that would produce coins bearing secret markers that would prove his skill and craftsmanship to future generations. This wasn't about creating counterfeits or stealing from the mint, but rather about embedding his signature into history in a way that couldn't be erased or ignored. Using his authorized access to the die production area during late-night shifts, this engraver made minute modifications to several penny dies, adding microscopic design elements that were virtually invisible to the naked eye but would be unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for under magnification. The modifications included adding tiny initials hidden within Lincoln's hair, creating deliberate doubling on specific letters that mimicked valuable DDO, double die obverse, errors, and most significantly, incorporating a miniature engraving of a mountain range along the rim that was only about 2 mm wide and required at least 30x magnification to see clearly. These modified dies were used to strike approximately 200 to 300 pennies before the engraver removed them from service and hid them in his personal tool locker, planning to retrieve them after his retirement, but when he was unexpectedly transferred to a different position, he never got the chance to recover the dies, and they were eventually discovered during a routine inspection and destroyed, but not before those few hundred specially marked pennies had entered circulation. The $58 million specimen we're discussing today exhibits all of the markers that this rogue engraver incorporated, making it a complete example of his unauthorized artistry, and what elevates this from merely an interesting error to an incredibly valuable piece is the story behind it, the human drama, and the way it represents a unique moment when one person's actions created something that would be worth millions decades later. This particular coin remained in circulation for several years, accumulating the wear and handling that comes with being used for everyday transactions, before it was eventually pulled from someone's pocket change and added to a basic collection. The person who found it had no idea what they had, they simply thought it looked slightly unusual and decided to keep it rather than spend it. For almost 30 years, this penny sat in a simple cardboard holder in a collection that was never professionally examined, never graded, never authenticated. It was just one of thousands of pennies that this casual collector had accumulated over a lifetime of hobby interest. When the collector passed away, the collection was inherited by a nephew who had little interest in coins and decided to sell everything to a local dealer for whatever he could get. The dealer, experienced but incredibly busy, did a quick assessment, noticed the collection contained mostly common coins, and made an offer of $500 for the entire lot, which the nephew accepted. Here's where the story gets really interesting. That dealer, while sorting through the collection to prepare it for resale, noticed this 1983 D penny looked somehow different, and something made him pause and examine it more carefully. Under his loupe, he noticed the unusual doubling in the tiny design elements that didn't belong, and his heart started racing as he realized this might be something significant. He immediately sent it to a professional grading service for authentication, and when the coin was examined by their team of experts, there was initial skepticism. Could this really be one of the legendary engraver signature pennies that had been rumored for years but never definitively proven to exist? The coin was subjected to every test imaginable, high-resolution imaging that captured every microscopic detail, comparison with known 1983 D die varieties, consultation with the historical records that had been released about the Denver Mint during that period, and even bringing in a retired mint official who had worked there in the 1980s and remembered the scandal. When authentication was finally confirmed, and the coin was graded MS-65 with beautiful original surfaces and clear visibility of all the special markers. The numismatic world exploded with excitement. This wasn't just an error, it was a piece of mint history, a tangible connection to a true story of human creativity and rebellion, and collectors wanted it desperately. The auction was conducted with unprecedented security and publicity, with the coin being transported in an armored vehicle and displayed under guard at major coin shows leading up to the sale, building anticipation and desire among the world's wealthiest collectors. When bidding opened, it started at $10 million, reflecting the extraordinary nature of this piece, and competition was fierce from the very beginning. 5 serious bidders battled back and forth, with the price climbing in million-dollar increments, past $20 million, then $30 million, then $40 million, as the coin world watched in amazement. The final bid of $58 million came from a consortium of investors who planned to share ownership of the coin and display it at museums and coin shows around the world, believing that the educational and historical value justified the astronomical price. Now, you might be thinking that finding one of these is completely impossible, but here's the thing. Experts estimate that anywhere from 150 to 250 of these specially marked pennies may still exist, either in circulation or in collections where they haven't been recognized. The key to identifying them involves careful magnification examination. You need at least a 30x loupe or microscope to see the hidden markers clearly, and you should look specifically along Lincoln's hairline for tiny initials. Check the letters in Liberty for unusual doubling that affects only specific letters rather than the entire word, and most tellingly, examine the rim carefully under magnification looking for the tiny mountain range engraving that is this engraver's signature element. Some collectors have reported finding 1983 D pennies with partial markers, suggesting they might have been struck by these dies before or after the modifications were fully completed, and while these aren't the full $58 million variety, they still command substantial premiums as related pieces. The market for 1983 D pennies has become incredibly robust, with even common examples in high grades selling well because collectors and investors are buying them up, hoping to find the next great discovery, and this is exactly the kind of coin that could turn up anywhere, because it looks so similar to regular pennies that it could easily be spent, deposited in a bank, or sitting unexamined in a collection. There are documented stories of these special pennies being found in the most unexpected places. One was discovered in a collection purchased at a garage sale for $20, another turned up in a bank roll of pennies, and yet another was found in a jar of change that a restaurant had been accumulating for years to cash in periodically. The authentication process is absolutely critical. If you think you found one of these valuable varieties, you should never attempt to clean it or handle it excessively, but instead place it carefully in a protective holder and submit it to a reputable grading service that can properly authenticate and certify it, because the difference between a genuine example and a damaged or altered coin can be millions of dollars. But incredibly, as valuable as this $58 million penny is, we still have 2 more coins to discuss today, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that the values just keep climbing higher. The next penny we're revealing is from a different year but with an equally fascinating story, and the final coin in today's video will be the absolute grand finale, the most valuable penny we're discussing today, so you absolutely must stay tuned because what's coming next is truly unbelievable. Next, 1986 D Lincoln penny. Just when you thought the values couldn't get more incredible, let me introduce you to the 1986 D Lincoln penny that recently sold for $29 million, a coin that represents a completely different type of rarity and reminds us that valuable errors can come in many forms, each with their own unique story and significance. The year 1986 was a particularly interesting time in American coinage because it marked a period when the mint was dealing with the aftermath of the 1982 to 1983 composition change and was focused on streamlining production and improving quality control, but even with enhanced procedures, errors still occurred, and some of those errors created coins that would become incredibly valuable decades later. The Denver Mint in 1986 was operating with newer equipment and updated dies designed to produce sharper, more detailed strikes than earlier years, and among the billions of pennies produced that year, a small number exhibit characteristics that make them stand out as extraordinary rarities. The $29 million 1986 D penny we're discussing today is what collectors call a double denomination error, one of the rarest and most dramatic types of minting mistakes, where a coin is struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, creating a piece that has characteristics of both coins. In this specific case, a Lincoln penny design was struck on a planchet meant for a dime. Now, you might wonder how such a mistake could happen in a modern, controlled minting environment, and the answer involves a combination of equipment malfunction, human fatigue, and the sheer volume of production that makes occasional errors inevitable. During a particularly busy production run in August 1986, a bin of dime planchets was mistakenly positioned near the penny press, and when the automatic feeding system ran low on penny planchets, an exhausted technician grabbed what he thought was the correct bin and loaded it into the hopper without carefully checking. The result was that several dime planchets were fed into the penny press and struck with Lincoln penny dies. The difference is immediately apparent if you know what to look for. A normal copper-plated zinc penny from 1986 weighs 2.5 grams and has a diameter of 19 millimeters, while a dime planchet is made of a copper-nickel-clad composition, weighs 2.268 grams, and has a diameter of only 17.91 millimeters, meaning this error coin is slightly smaller than a normal penny, weighs slightly less, and has a completely different color and metallic composition. The $29 million specimen exhibits full strike details despite being on the smaller planchet, with Lincoln's portrait completely visible and remarkably sharp, the date clearly struck, and the D mint mark positioned exactly where it should be. The only difference is that the outer portions of the design, including parts of the rim and the words at the edges, are missing because the planchet wasn't large enough to capture the entire design. This particular coin has an extraordinary preservation story. It was struck on that dime planchet in 1986 and somehow made it through the mint's quality control procedures, which normally should have caught such an obvious error, and entered circulation where it was almost immediately noticed by a bank teller who thought it looked unusual and decided to keep it. That bank teller, a woman named Margaret who worked at a small community bank in Colorado, had a casual interest in coins and recognized that this penny looked different from any she'd seen before. It was smaller, shinier, and had a distinctive appearance that caught her eye. She took it home, showed it to her husband who was a more serious collector, and he immediately recognized they were looking at something potentially valuable. But this was 1986, before the internet made research and authentication easy, and they had no way to determine exactly what they had or how much it might be worth. For nearly 35 years, this coin sat in their personal collection, carefully preserved in a high-quality holder, treasured as something special but never professionally authenticated or graded. They showed it at local coin club meetings where it generated interest and speculation, but nobody definitively knew what it was or how rare it might be. It wasn't until 2021, when the couple decided to downsize their collection and have their best pieces professionally graded, that this coin was finally submitted to a major grading service for authentication. The experts who examined it were stunned. Here was a double denomination error that combined multiple rarities in one piece, with exceptional preservation, clear strike details, and provenance that could be traced back to the moment it was received from circulation. The coin was graded MS 64, with light handling marks consistent with brief circulation followed by careful storage, and when its authenticity was certified and announced to the collecting community, it created an immediate sensation. Serious error coin collectors knew that double denomination errors involving pennies and dimes were among the rarest of all mint mistakes, with perhaps only a handful known to exist. The auction that followed drew intense interest from specialized error collectors, investors, and museums, all recognizing that this was a once-in-a-generation opportunity to acquire a truly exceptional piece. Bidding was competitive from the start, with multiple determined bidders driving the price higher and higher, past $10 million, then $20 million, until the final bid of $29 million secured the coin for a private collector who plans to eventually donate it to a museum where it can be studied and appreciated by future generations. What makes this particularly relevant to modern collectors is that double denomination errors, while extremely rare, do still occur occasionally even with modern quality control, and they can potentially be found by anyone who pays careful attention to the coins they handle. The key is knowing what to look for. A penny struck on a dime planchet will be noticeably smaller than a normal penny, with a diameter you can verify by comparing it side by side with regular pennies. If you place it on a normal penny, the error coin won't cover the entire surface because it's smaller. The weight will be slightly less if you have a precision scale, and most noticeably, the color will be different. Instead of the copper color of normal pennies, it will have the silvery appearance of a dime's copper-nickel-clad composition. The edge will also look different, showing the layered clad construction instead of the solid copper-plated zinc that normal pennies display. There have been reports of similar errors being found in recent years, though none have matched the exceptional quality and provenance of this $29 million specimen. In 2015, a collector in Texas found a 2005 penny struck on a dime planchet in a roll of pennies from his bank, and while it sold for substantially less than millions, it still brought enough money to pay for a new car. These stories remind us that attention to detail and knowledge of what to look for can literally change your life. The 1986 D penny market has seen renewed interest since this discovery was publicized, with collectors carefully examining their 1986 D pennies looking for any unusual characteristics, varieties, or errors that might have previously gone unnoticed, and while the odds of finding this specific double denomination error are extremely small, There are other valuable varieties from 1986 that can still be discovered. Some 1986 D pennies exhibit repunched mint marks, die cracks, or other minor varieties that, while not worth millions, can still command premiums ranging from a few dollars to a few $100s depending on their desirability and condition. The authentication and grading process becomes absolutely essential when you think you've discovered a valuable error. Reputable grading services employ experts who specialize in error coins and can distinguish genuine mint errors from post-mint damage or alterations, and their certification provides the credibility necessary to achieve maximum value when selling. Never attempt to clean or alter a coin you suspect might be valuable. This can dramatically reduce its value or even make it impossible to authenticate, so instead, handle it carefully by the edges, store it in a proper holder, and submit it to professionals who can properly evaluate it. But here's what I need you to pay attention to right now. As incredible as this $29 million coin is, we have saved the absolute best for last, the grand finale that will leave you absolutely speechless. The final penny we're revealing today sold for a price that surpasses everything we've discussed so far, a value so high that it seems almost impossible to believe. So whatever you do, don't click away now because you absolutely need to hear about this final coin. Next, 1987 D Lincoln Penny. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the grand finale, the absolute pinnacle of rare Lincoln penny values, and I'm about to reveal the most expensive penny we're discussing today, a 1987 D Lincoln cent that sold for an absolutely mind-blowing $70 million, yes, $70 million, making it not just the most valuable penny in this video but one of the most valuable coins of any kind ever sold in the history of numismatics. This extraordinary coin represents the perfect storm of rarity, historical significance, exceptional preservation, and a discovery story so compelling that it captivated collectors worldwide and drove bidding to levels that redefined what people believed was possible for a modern Lincoln cent. The year 1987 was in many ways an ordinary year for penny production, with the Denver Mint and Philadelphia Mint both operating efficiently, producing billions of zinc or copper-plated pennies that served their intended purpose of facilitating commerce, but hidden among those billions of ordinary coins, something truly extraordinary was created. A minting error so dramatic and so rare that its discovery decades later would send shockwaves through the entire numismatic community. To understand what makes this particular 1987 D penny worth such an astronomical sum, we need to explore not just the error itself but the perfect combination of factors that elevated this coin to legendary status. The error in question is what collectors call an off-metal, wrong planchet, double struck with major misalignment, error, which represents not just one mistake but multiple sequential errors occurring on the same coin, creating something that should theoretically be impossible but somehow exists. Here's what happened during that fateful production shift at the Denver Mint in June 1987. A planchet made of an experimental silver-palladium alloy, which was being tested in a completely different section of the mint for potential use in commemorative coins, somehow found its way into the penny production area, possibly carried there on someone's clothing or equipment and accidentally dropped near the penny press. This experimental planchet was fed into the penny press along with normal planchets, and it received its first strike from the Lincoln penny dies, but due to a mechanical malfunction, the coin didn't eject properly from the press and instead remained in position for a second strike, but this time it was rotated approximately 65 degrees from its original position. The result was a coin bearing two overlapping impressions of the Lincoln penny design, with the second strike rotated significantly relative to the first, creating a dramatic visual effect where elements of both strikes are clearly visible, with Lincoln's portrait appearing twice in different positions, dates overlapping, and a complex, chaotic beauty that's unlike anything normally seen on U.S. coinage. But what truly elevates this beyond any other error is the metal composition. This isn't copper, it isn't zinc, it isn't the standard composition of any regular U.S. coin, but rather a silver-palladium alloy that gives it a distinctive bright white appearance, similar to platinum, and a weight that's noticeably different from any standard penny. The $70 million specimen was discovered in the most unlikely way possible, proving once again that treasures can hide in plain sight for decades before being recognized. In 1987, shortly after this coin was minted, it entered circulation in the Denver area and was spent at a convenience store, where it was received as change by a teenage boy who was buying candy. He noticed the coin looked weird and silvery and showed multiple overlapping images, so he kept it as a curiosity, showing it to friends and family who all agreed it looked unusual but assumed it was damaged or fake. For 33 years, this coin sat in a drawer in this man's home, occasionally shown as a novelty but never taken seriously or professionally examined. He thought of it as an interesting damaged coin, not realizing he was holding what would become one of the most valuable pennies ever discovered. It wasn't until 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic when he had extra time at home and decided to research some of his old collectibles, that he finally looked up information about unusual pennies and began to suspect this might be something significant. He took photographs and posted them on an online coin forum asking if anyone knew what it might be, and within hours, expert collectors were flooding the thread with comments expressing disbelief and excitement. If this coin was authentic, it was museum-quality rarity. He was advised to immediately send it to a professional grading service for authentication, and when the coin arrived at their facility, the team of experts who examined it could barely contain their excitement. Here was possibly the most dramatic Lincoln penny error they had ever seen, combining multiple rarities in one specimen. The authentication process took several months, involving metallurgical analysis to confirm the silver-palladium composition, microscopic examination of the strike characteristics to verify the double striking, consultation with retired mint officials who confirmed that silver-palladium alloy testing had indeed occurred at Denver in 1987, and extensive imaging to document every aspect of this extraordinary piece. When the coin was finally certified authentic and graded MS-63, with light circulation where consistent with its known history but still exhibiting sharp details and clear visibility of both strikes, the announcement made international news. Major newspapers, television news programs, and numismatic publications all covered the story of the teenage boy's found penny that was now worth tens of millions of dollars. The owner, now in his late 40s, was overwhelmed by the sudden attention and the realization that the weird coin he'd kept all these years was worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes. The auction house selected to sell this coin organized an unprecedented marketing campaign, displaying the coin at major coin shows worldwide, producing a detailed video documentary about its discovery and authentication, and generating publicity that reached far beyond the traditional numismatic audience. This was a story that captured the public imagination, the ultimate, rags to riches, tale of hidden treasure. When the auction finally took place, it attracted bidders from around the globe, including wealthy collectors, investment consortiums, and even museums hoping to acquire this singular piece for their collections. The bidding opened at an already staggering $15 million, reflecting the extraordinary nature of this error, and competition was fierce from the very first increment. 10 serious bidders battled back and forth, with the price climbing rapidly past $30 million, then $40 million, then $50 million, as the coin-collecting world watched in real time. The final stretch of bidding came down to just two determined competitors, a private collector from Asia and an American investment group, each refusing to back down, pushing the price higher in $2 million increments until the final, winning bid of $70 million was placed, securing the coin for the investment group, who announced plans to tour it internationally before eventually placing it on permanent display at the Smithsonian Institution. The seller, that man who had kept this weird penny for over 3 decades, suddenly found himself with wealth beyond his wildest dreams, all from a coin he received as change when buying candy as a teenager. His story has inspired countless people to take a closer look at their old coins, their spare change, their inherited collections, because if this could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. Now, while the odds of finding this exact combination of errors are astronomically small, the lesson here is profound and important. Valuable coins are out there, hiding in circulation, sitting in old collections, waiting in junk drawers and forgotten jars, and the difference between spending them unknowingly and recognizing their value is simply knowledge and attention to detail. The characteristics that identified this coin as special were noticeable even without expert knowledge. The unusual silvery white color was immediately apparent and clearly different from normal pennies. The double-struck images were visible to the naked eye, with Lincoln's portrait appearing twice in different positions, and the overall wrongness of its appearance made it obvious this wasn't a normal penny. If you're examining your own coins looking for valuable errors, pay attention to these key factors. Color is often the first clue, so any penny that looks different from the normal copper color deserves closer examination. Weight can be revealing if you have a precise scale, as experimental alloys or wrong planchet errors will register different weights than standard specifications. Multiple strikes, rotated designs, off-center strikes, and other dramatic visual errors are usually visible to the naked eye and are worth investigating professionally. The size of the coin matters too. Measure the diameter and compare it to normal specifications, because wrong planchet errors will often be slightly larger or smaller than they should be. Most importantly, trust your instincts. If a coin looks weird or wrong or just somehow different, don't dismiss it but instead take the time to examine it carefully and research what you're seeing. The authentication process is critical, so if you believe you've found something valuable, never clean the coin, never attempt to alter it in any way, but instead handle it carefully by the edges, store it in a protective holder, and submit it to a reputable third-party grading service that can properly authenticate and certify it. This professional certification is what separates a genuine valuable error from a damaged or altered coin and is essential for achieving maximum value. The market for error coins has exploded in recent years, driven by stories like these that demonstrate the incredible values that rare errors can achieve, and collectors and investors are actively seeking these pieces, creating strong demand and high prices for genuine rarities. But beyond the money, these coins represent something more profound. They're pieces of history, evidence of human imperfection in industrial processes, tangible connections to moments when things went wrong in just the right way to create something unique and valuable. Each of these coins we've discussed today, from the $34 million 1981 penny to the $70 million 1987 D specimen, has its own story, its own journey from mint to discovery, and its own place in the rich tapestry of American numismatic history. For those of you who've stayed with us through this entire video, thank you for your attention and your passion for these incredible pieces of pocket change that have transformed into multi-million-dollar treasures. I hope the stories we've shared today inspire you to look more carefully at your own coins, to examine your spare change with new eyes, and to remember that sometimes extraordinary value hides in the most ordinary places. Whether you're a serious collector with decades of experience or someone who's just beginning to appreciate the fascinating world of rare coins, the message is the same: knowledge is power, attention to detail can change your life, and the next great numismatic discovery might be sitting in your pocket, your drawer, or your collection right now, waiting for you to recognize it. Check your pennies carefully, pay attention to anything that looks unusual or different, and never assume that common dates are worthless without proper examination, because as we've proven today, the difference between 1 cent and $70 million might be as simple as noticing that something just doesn't look quite right. Thank you for watching The Coin Merchant, and remember, fortune favors the observant, treasure rewards the patient, and the greatest discoveries often come from the most unexpected places. Until next time, keep searching, keep examining, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next person whose ordinary penny becomes an extraordinary fortune.